All right, looks like we're going. Welcome back to another one of these things where we're just kind of chatting about whatever comes to mind. Hope you're having a wonderful Friday. We've made it to the end of another week. And yeah, that's pretty cool. This is actually a second take again. I am tempted to put up another video. That was me just testing how OBS was doing after I adjusted some settings. I kept getting a ton of drop frames, like maybe every 45 seconds ish. And then sometimes it'd just be like, a lot of it would just be like, just a bunch of drop frames all the time, which yeah, it was happening so much. It was just like getting in the way of me actually talking. It was very distracting. It seems to be doing okay. And the test video was just me like singing to myself. I found it enjoyable to go back and watch. It's a couple minutes long just to make sure I was doing goofy stuff long enough to make sure that it's not a problem anymore. So yeah, I might throw two videos up. We'll see. Maybe I'll put it up there tomorrow. That way it's not like in the way of other things. Or maybe save it for a rainy day and just like insightful content. Me singing for no reason. Maybe. Maybe. Nah, I'll probably just put it up as like another thing. Anyway, hope you're doing well. Genuinely hope you're having a fantastic week or had a fantastic week and you're looking forward to the weekend, whatever it may hold. Things to talk about today. In line with talking about game-related things on Fridays, I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about the game that Heather and I are streaming right now. Not like this instant, but like it's in our current cycle of Monday and Friday streaming out on Twitch at Significant Gamers. Twitch.com TV/Significant Gamers. If you want to check that out. The last thing we played, I talked about a little bit, was Immortals Phoenix Rising, which was mostly me playing and Heather doing commentary on things. So we decided to kind of flip the seats a little bit, and Heather's going through Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. And that's been kind of fun. Initially, it was going to be like me making a bunch of decisions for things to do, but like me not quite remembering how rigid Morrowind is about like the decisions you make as far as your build and what that enables you to do later wasn't very conducive to me just making random decisions. So that kind of fell a little bit by the wayside, but still rather enjoyable. We're not playing it in its original state. We're playing it in a heavily modded state, but it's still a pretty neat experience, especially since I hadn't like played through that. My only real run-in with Vardenfell is Elder Scrolls Online. So it was kind of neat. Like I recognized cities that we were in based on how I remembered them from ESO. So they did a good job in ESO. Making it look like how it was in the original game. So that was pretty neat. But one of the things that I want to chat about here is kind of differences between Morrowind and Skyrim. And it's maybe a little strange that I'm like focusing on Skyrim, but that was probably the Elder Scrolls game that I gravitated toward the most. I actually hadn't played Morrowind, so this is my first time like seeing it being played or experiencing it. I had played Oblivion, but not all the way through. I'd got kind of frustrated with the controls on Xbox 360 since I was trying to do like a mage build, and then I was trying to do a bow build, and it's just hard to aim. It's hard to aim with a controller, and I thought I'd do okay because I played a ton of Halo, and like I thought it might just click, and it just doesn't. Like Bungie did a really good job like making that feel really good in your hands in a controller, and it didn't feel like it was at the forefront of people's mind at Bethesda for Oblivion. It does fine. It's just like, having come from controls like that from a first person perspective, it was kind of like, it's not doing it for me. However, when Skyrim came out, I had gotten it on PC, and that felt just a ton better. That's like, I feel like if I'd played Morrowind on PC, as my friends had at the time, then it probably would have clicked a lot better. But that's kind of where we're at. It was the first Elder Scrolls game that I made it all the way through. It was the most recent installment. And as such, it's also the game that I have the most, I don't know, like, feelings for. It's just, I understand why that game was fun to me. And while I haven't played Morrowind, Heather is very, very attached to Morrowind. So we've been talking a little bit about it on stream, differences between these two games and how they like give the player power. And it's been mostly off stream, but we talked a little bit about it on the stream. And I kind of wanted to share those thoughts here just because I think they do, in their own ways, make the game an interesting role-playing experience. So we'll start with Morrowind. So in Morrowind, the best way I can kind of describe how you're setting up your character is that of rolling a character in a tabletop RPG. You have these core scores, points, stats that you have across like all of your characters, like meaningful statistics, things like strength and endurance and speed and agility, agility and speed, and intelligence and wisdom, charisma and things like that. And every time you level up, you can increase those base stat numbers by a little bit. And the way that you level up is by performing certain actions that align with, with those actions. It's really not really much of a better way to describe that. Essentially, if you're using a short sword, then you're increasing your short sword capability. And if you level all of these other statistics up, things like if you're jumping, you're improving your acrobatics, something that doesn't exist in Skyrim, unfortunately. If you're swimming or running, you're increasing your athletics. If you're swinging a sword, then you're increasing your sword stats. If you're casting destruction spells, then you're increasing your destruction magic skill. And when you collectively level up a lot of these individual skills, then that ends up in you gaining a level. You go take a quick nappy, and then you wake up, provided you didn't have a dream or somebody didn't come to try and assassinate you, because that happens a lot, where we just go to, rest to level up, and then somebody from the Dark Brotherhood is there to kill us, or we had a nightmare and woke up being like, well, that was scary, and you didn't level up, so you have to go sleep again. Which is fair. That is kind of how nightmares go. It's like, I feel like I just didn't get any sleep. I didn't learn anything from that. So good on them. It's a little annoying in game, but when you think about it, you're kind of like, yeah, okay. If I had a really bad dream, I probably wouldn't have woken up rested, and I probably wouldn't have gained a level, provided that's how reality would work. But these stats, the base ones, and kind of the skills stats that you're balancing too, you're very much tied to what you choose from the beginning of the game. When you roll your character, you're choosing effectively how you're going to play the game for the rest of that session, that playthrough for this player character. That's kind of why we'd started, and it was kind of like, yeah, well, you can like make the decisions while I'm playing. And I was like, we're going to do all these goofy things, and it really doesn't like let you do that. You're effectively like locked into how you were going to play that character. Because if I just started being like, oh, let's start doing spear then, like using a spear instead of magic, all touch magic, like making it really hard for Heather, because I was like, let's do magic, but it's only like close proximity magic. You have to be able to touch the enemy in order to cast the spell. And I was like, let's do kind of like a magic monk type thing. And one, the animation doesn't really click. You're like doing this whenever you're doing the spell. So it's just like you're gently touching them, or sprinkling pixie dust onto the enemies, which has its charm, but it's definitely not the monk like, wow. It's just like there's fire on my fist. It's not like that. You can definitely bridge the gap in your mind. It's been easier for me over time, but I digress. See, it's not like this isn't fun. It's fun, but, and this is just kind of where I'm going to kind of segue into how Skyrim kind of approaches this a little bit differently. But you're kind of tied to how you decided to play the game at the beginning of the game. You're very much having to do what you decided on without having to do heavy investment later to change that. And that is probably more realistic. Like, you can say it's like, well, I'm going to do this. And it's like, I got my master's degree in blacksmithing. And you're like, well, I want to go be a seamstress. And there might be some skills. There might be some skills that are transferable there. But you're certainly not going to be a master seamstress after you became a master blacksmith. And Morrowind takes that probably a little too far for my play style to like. So, how I mentioned there are these skills that you can level up, like acrobatics for jumping and swimming for athletics. Excuse me. Excuse me. Where it kind of falls a little flat, though, especially since we decided to do a mage build, is Magicka is like the mana for this universe. That can run pretty low, and instead of like keeping like pockets full of potions to regenerate that resource, your probably gut reaction is to just switch to a weapon that you can use to hit people with. But you miss a lot as a mage because you're not using it very often. And as a mage, hitting enemies with stuff is either a minor or a miscellaneous skill, which means that it's not going to level as fast, and it's just not going to be what the game expects you to be doing. As a result, your miss chance is really, really high with these weapons. So you feel really, really powerful when you're playing the game the way that you had effectively signed up to play the game when you rolled your character. But anytime you step out of that bubble, you feel like a toddler. You feel like the piñata and everybody else is hitting you. And it's a weird take for the game, or a weird path for the game to go down. It's kind of funny when you're like everyone's like, you're the hero, and then you start flailing your sword out in front of people and you're missing. Like, you're actually going through them, and for some reason the sword disappears long enough for it to like pass through what they're through the enemy's body or something. Maybe that's how it works. It's just kind of hurts like your feeling of being able to do something powerful within the game, essentially. And maybe that's a part of it. It feels like a part of the role play that's unique to Morrowind, different than Skyrim, where in Skyrim the only things that you're defining for yourself are, I'm also getting like a little bit of the video like jumping again, but it's also not telling me it's dropping frames, so maybe it's okay. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, when you make your character in Skyrim, you're really just choosing the how do you say, like, appearance. You're choosing very aesthetic things when you're making your character in Skyrim. You do, based on your race, get a skill that's unique to that race. But beyond that, it's all entirely aesthetic. And you do get these, you do kind of have the same sort of underlying skills, but they're not visible to you as the player. You do get all of these I guess I should say base stats. There are still like those skills, but implemented a little bit more broadly. So instead of in Morrowind where you have to if you want to get good with a short sword, then that's different than a long blade, and those skills aren't transferable. So if you're really good with a short sword, and then you put that away and you take out a long blade and it's a much lower level, then you'll just start missing like crazy. In Skyrim, that's not really the case. So I guess a better example for that would have been like if you're good with a short sword and then you start using a one-handed mace and you just start missing a lot, because Morrowind treats the short sword and the mace as a different class of weapon, essentially a different skill that you're building. It's non-transferable. But in Skyrim, it groups one-handed weapons together, two-handed weapons together, archery into its own thing. They still have destruction. Both games still do destruction as all of your kind of anima elemental type skills. Illusion, alteration, restoration, things like that. So they still group those together. But Skyrim kind of did the player a favor by like grouping those very similar weapons together and giving you perks as you level that up, which is where Skyrim super deviates from Morrowind in that regard. So because each of these weapons you can just switch between them, they sort of embed these, like, why would you choose, what makes you want to use a mace over a short blade, over a dagger, over a spear, over a greatsword, over a great hammer. They end up becoming perks that are built into skill trees. So it still encourages you to stick with something that you chose to be playing with. But in order to kind of build your own narrative, it encourages you to, one, use a two-handed weapon if you want to use this class of weapons. But if you want to be like you're only going to use great hammers, for instance, then there's a little branch for you to go down that's like, here's great hammer specific stuff. Here are things that apply to all two-handed weapons, but you don't have to like, it's encouraging you to like choose one path beyond that point. Like which types of these weapons are you using, and then giving you perks for that. That way, when you switch weapons, it feels more like, okay, I feel like I'm more of a master of this weapon because I know this perk. I don't know this other one. And it's encouraging me to stick with this one thing I had rather than constantly switch between whatever I find next. Like if I find a really good greatsword, but I've been using great hammer, if it doesn't make sense for my character to use that greatsword, I might have grabbed it just because it's better if I wasn't invested in a perk in a skill tree somewhere. But that's more how I kind of see the game. And I think it's kind of how the designers want the game to come across, is that because Skyrim hides these base stats, essentially, you get 3 effectively stats, and they're not tied to your strength or your endurance or your wisdom, intelligence. You get 3 things. You get health, magicka, stamina. And when you level up, you choose which one of those you want to get 10 more points in, which feels less great, honestly. But what you do get in that you sort of trade away for that nuance there is the game isn't like signing you up for who you were at the beginning. It does get a little bit harder toward the end of the game because it still has this like law of diminishing returns as you go through, like to make you feel like you're getting more powerful faster at the beginning of the game. Your first few levels are gained by increasing like 4 like skill stats, similar to Morrowind. You increase your like individual skills to gain a level overall, and you don't have to sleep in Skyrim to do that, which is honestly like it's okay because then you can at least gain a level in a dungeon, or you don't have to find a bed rather to get your level. But at the same time, I do kind of miss that. I feel like in my first playthrough, I didn't sleep at all, which isn't very realistic. But whatever. It was just one of those things that I kind of missed from Morrowind and Oblivion, is the requirement to sleep, to reflect on what you've learned. But definitely appreciate the sort of accessibility of being able to level up wherever. You have learned everything that you need. You just need to spend that experience essentially. But as I was saying, like how Skyrim sort of tailors that so that how in Morrowind it's like you're signing up for what you did. Skyrim encourages you to make up your mind throughout that first few levels by slowing down that level up cycle. So instead of it being like 4 skill level ups, eventually it's like 10, eventually it's 20, eventually it's 30. The level ups happen a lot less frequently. And that doesn't stop you from being able to like level up those skills so that you're more effective with the weapons or with that skill in general. But it does prevent you from, well, I guess I should have said, you get to choose that, like, that health, magicka, stamina, but you also get to invest in one of those perks and skill trees. So those get harder to get over time. There are mods out there that have made that easier or more accessible. So, for instance, if you defeat a dragon and you absorb their soul, you also get a dragon blood potion, which lets you buy another skill point. So there are mods out there to help with that. Morrowind likely has them too. But that's kind of how the base game of Skyrim sort of encourages the player character, to have not like dip into everything, but find their role play and stick with it. However, Skyrim does let you sort of choose based on the items that you're using who you are, and it doesn't stop you from being particularly good or bad at those skills. So if at some point I was like, yeah, restoration has, like, I really liked it and I got to like 50 skill points, and so far the only like offensive thing I can do is lay down a paralysis rune, I kind of need to start spending points in other things to make this character viable. That probably wouldn't have been a very realistic thing to do in Morrowind. You can do it, and you're basically going back to square one to redo all of that. But in Skyrim, you can just pick up another weapon or a different school of magic, and basically just keep going from where you left off. That said, I feel like the idea of finding a role play and trying to get into that character, and if it doesn't work for you, then starting over seems like a very real thing that you would do. Like, okay, what kind of story am I trying to tell here? Am I really just playing a game, or am I trying to get into this character? And in all those cases, in both of these games' cases, you're probably trying to get into the character. That's what they're trying to sell here, is this feeling of a tabletop RPG. And you're fitting into this world rather than this group of friends or acquaintances or whoever you're playing with. You're trying to find your character's place, your character's story in this world. And if your character just sort of changes entirely halfway through, then it probably doesn't feel as good. You're probably going to start over so that you can establish who this character is in the world from the start. So do both have their kind of trade-offs with that late game, can I potentially change? I'd probably argue that, yeah, both of them don't really have mechanics to allow that. Skyrim is, to me at least, a little bit more accessible to being able to switch a little bit later. You don't feel like a toddler with 2 left hands, like trying to swing a sword for the first time just because it's not a dagger. But you'd still probably want to kind of reintroduce your character into the world in that case. However, I don't think anybody can disagree that grouping the one-handed and two-handed weapons together was a very smart move, and Morrowind just feels terrible when it's just like, I have this dagger. Oh no, I have this sword. It's 2 inches longer, and for some reason I don't know how to use this anymore. So that was a really good thing in either way there. But those are kind of my thoughts there. It's Morrowind does a pretty good job of being like, who's your character going to be when you roll that character? And we're going to do what we can within the game's mechanics to make you feel like you should be doing that and empowering decisions that align with that character choice. Where Skyrim does do that, but it lets you change your mind a little bit easier, especially for the first probably like 10 levels. So it feels a little more malleable. Like you're finding yourself in this world and deciding what you want to do as you explore it, rather than, I haven't even seen this world yet, this is what I'm going to do. And it's very much more item focused than Morrowind's base stat focused. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing on either side is likely down to what kind of player you are. For Heather, Morrowind resonates a lot more. For me, I think Skyrim resonates a lot more. Do I find it fun experiencing Morrowind? Yeah. Does Heather find Skyrim fun? Yeah. But it's really just like how it ends up boiling down. What type of experience you're looking for. They both do a fantastic job of making you feel like you're a part of a pretty cool world. And for what that's worth, yeah, it's just a pretty cool thing. Anywho, I think that's about it for today. Hopefully there's no more video issues as I'm signing this thing off. But hope you're having a wonderful Friday. And that continues into a wonderful weekend. And we'll catch you in the next one. See ya.